welcome you. For Canon, I'd like to introduce Michael Bravin. Michael's the director of Canon Burbank.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Welcome. I always tell people when they come here, the first time you come here, you're a guest, and then we've got you. Now, after you've been here, you're part of our family. And what I mean by that, after you get a chance to see what our facility is about, we offer programming during the week and the evening. During the day, we have many days when we're light, and I invite people to come and use our facility during the day. So all of the rooms that you'll see here are 4K DI suite, our prep bay, our client cafe, all of our rooms. If you need to have a meeting here, if you find yourself in Burbank, if you want to come and test a piece of equipment, if you want to see how a third-party piece of equipment works with our cameras or our lenses work with a third-party piece of equipment, you're welcome to come here. All you have to do is contact myself or Amy or Tim or Charles, and we'll make it available for you. And I'm happy tonight because I've had an association with Jim for a long time, and this is a perfect opportunity of kind of a synthesis between what Jim's been doing and pioneering and now being a emeritus in the digital cinema world with our facility, because this facility is built for the digital cinema world, for cinematographers and for people that work in our industry. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jim and Tim, and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you. So now let's get up. You're going to be on your feet a little bit tonight, and we're going to move into the test bay, and Tim Smith is going to tell us about the cameras. First off, we're going to look at the C700. I believe there's 3 cameras.
There is. It's a series.
Tim is going to tell us about.
Yes, I want to talk about starting with the full frame version, which we just released. We haven't shipped, so next week I guess it starts shipping. So that's just released, which is part of a family of 700s. There's the 700 Super 35 sensor, which was the first one we released last year. We followed it up a little bit later with the 700 global shutter sensor, which is also Super 35, and now we have our 6K full frame sensor. All 3. The body designs are exactly the same. You can't tell the difference unless you put a little P-Tux label on it, like we did, without turning it on. They're identical in weight, size, basic specifications, other than obviously resolution, and then some changes in high frame rates. The Super 35 sensor will go higher in frame rates than the full frame unit, but that's the only real spec difference between the 2 units. They all record to the Codex recorder in RAW, or they can record to CFast in logs 1, 2, and Canon logs 1, 2, and 3. 15 stops of dynamic range on all of them, so they're very similar that way. Really great cameras, available in EF and PL.
So what is the size of the sensor in the
In this case,
the full frame?
It's a 5.9K sensor, so just under 6K resolution. It's 5952 by 3140.
And what are some of the advantages of that?
You know, you've got a lot of people are talking about shooting full frame, and obviously you want to be able to shoot full frame. But when you have a sensor with that physical size, you can also do an excellent anamorphic, and the camera will do anamorphic because you can get a 4x3 extraction when you have that much height in the sensor.
So it's taking Super 35 anamorphic glass.
Yes, and then doing the de-squeeze from a 4x3, kind of like what's done on the Alexas and things like that. So it's very similar. Now in the Super 35 version, we can do it as well, but when you do the de-squeeze, you end up just under 2K resolution. When you do it with 6K to start with, you end up with a 4K anamorphic image off of Super 35.
And of course, you have much shallower depth of field.
As long as you're in the full frame mode. You can also put this in a Super 35 crop, and then you can use all the standard Super 35 lenses that are out there. And one of the nice things about it is you'll be shooting from a 5.9K sensor, and they're doing what we're calling a super sample. So you're sampling the entire sensor, all 5.9K of it, and then internally reducing it to a 4K recording to CFast internally. Now you can also do a Super 16.
So it's a larger sensor. You're recording more data?
Much more data.
Yep.
Much more data. When you're shooting a full 4K RAW, your 1 terabyte Codex cards are about 22 minutes. You go into Super 35 and you're about 47 minutes. So it's a considerable, it's a buttload of data actually at 6K.
But you, at 6K, okay.
6K. At 4K, internally into the card at 6K, then if you internally into the card, you're only recording 4K. So you get much more time out of the media.
Okay, let's talk about the shutters. You have some different shutters.
There's a third.
What are the differences there?
Well, the global shutter version, which is Super 35, that's the C700 GS, the global shutter, which was partly due to the demand of Netflix and some other networks that said we do a lot of cop shows, we get the blinking lights, global shutter is a big issue. So if you're going to go with that type of a storyline, flash bulbs and police lights and sirens, then it's a global shutter choice, and go with that one so you can eliminate all those flashbang corrections. Now all the other cameras also have built in what's called electronic flashbang correction. You turn it on or off. So if, let's say, you're doing a runway scene with photographers and those flashes keep giving you those cut scene, you get that cut half frame, the camera knows and will digitally fill that in. Works most of the time, but not all of it. You really need a global shutter for that. If there's a lot of movement, sometimes you can get a head over here and a body over here, but for the most part, it can fill it in from the frame before and the frame after internally. But to guarantee that, you got to go with the global shutter.
What about the sensitivity when you're using one? Is it like, can you go 360 shutter angle to get more light with?
With a global shutter, or there wouldn't be any difference there. But yes, you can. Yeah, you can increase your. I don't know if I understand the question exactly, but
I don't know if I
everybody here
understand the
probably
question
does,
either. No. So, if I'm on a regular shutter,
Like a 180.
yeah, I can go to something close to 360 and get more exposure.
Yes, but
Can't do that with
you're going to need to go up
global
in your
shutter, right?
No, you can't go that high. Can't go that high. Not in the global shutter mode.
So I'm just trying to think of some of the different the differences.
Differences in, well, in
When
how
you might
would
want to
shoot it.
use it, when you might not want to use it.
I would. The biggest difference, I think, for me is the over-under, the latitude. In order to be at the same latitude as the 700 Super 35, which is like 8 stops over and 7 under, somewhere 15 stops in there, you've got to go from 800 ISO to 1600 ISO to get to the same latitude. So you've got to stop where the difference. So the sensitivity is different on the global shutter because of the global shutter. So native ISO is 800, is considered 800 on all three of them in terms of noise base. But if you really want to get equal latitude so that you're right down the middle, you'd be at 1600 on the global shutter and 700 on the full frame and on the Super 35. 1600 actually is really clean on all of these. 3200 is very usable as well.
So I know Canon makes a lot of full frame glass, but I see we're using a Zeiss today.
We make a lot, but we don't make enough. And this is really beautiful glass. Our primes that are EF mount are all full frame. So we have 7, we have the 14, the 20, 24, 35, 85, 135 in EF full frame. And then all our still camera glass from SLRs, not all, but we have a large amount of it in full frame. But these are PLs. So in PL, we don't have any full frame glass at this point. It would be nice. So we went to our friends at Zeiss that make some beautiful full frame glass, and they've been nice enough to help us along, even with our demo film, so we really appreciate that. So, and then there's anamorphic. We don't do anamorphic glass as well, but when the camera shoots anamorphic in PL, then you would choose whatever anamorphic you want.
All right. You have anything else you'd like to add?
Light, you can't tell from the video, but it's extremely light. It's a magnesium alloy all the way around, so it's all metal. It's an incredibly light camera, relatively speaking, to other cameras. Surprisingly, when you pick it up. Come by here and pick it up.
Nancy Schreiber, ASC, made that point to me.
Yes.
She said that she couldn't be here tonight, but she shot the demo piece that you're going to see, and she was raving about the camera, and one thing that she really likes is she said Canon finally made a camera that's good to handle, because she wasn't wild about the form factor of the C300.
Right, she used it a lot, but we used to have to build it kind of out the way she wanted, and I still think that's fine. As a handheld camera, the 300 was really designed for that. Nancy's more of an on-your-shoulder traditional cinematographer, and this is more of an on-your-shoulder traditional design. And then we did shoot all that film the way Nancy would shoot it. But it was also incredibly light, and she seems pretty hands-on. She was throwing that on her shoulder a lot more than we expected. So.
Yeah. And now this is the Codex,
this is our Codex recorder. Now,
totally integrated, looks like.
Yes and no. It's an accessory. It's integrated in terms of its function. It was designed specifically for this camera by Codex. There's no power buttons, nothing on this. All of that integrates in when you mount it onto the back. So if you're not going to shoot with the Codex because you're not shooting RAW, remove this, and this is where your battery plate would go. When you do shoot with the Codex, you just integrate this in, and then everything's controlled internally. So it's the easiest system we've ever had for shooting RAW. No more external recorders at all. So everything is controlled that way. You initialize the cards through here. You do all your firmware upgrades through here. So it really is.
And the drives just pop out of that?
Yes, would be your drive, your SSD.
Oh, that's easy, yeah.
So, and they are bulletproof. Shooting raw is more expensive, but when you need it, you need it. So, and this is incredibly easy to do that way.
Let's talk about the controls.
The controls are all three are identical. The menu systems are identical. Let me show you the, don't have it on this one. There's two controls as well. If you can take a look at this, you've got a second set of controls on both sides, and they're repeated on both sides. So everything you see here is also going to be over here. The menu system is pretty simple for the basic controls like frame rates and shutter angles, but you also have user keys that can be programmed to any of these. And there's 3 menus, so these can be turned into 12 different user keys. So if what I really want to reach to all the time is peaking, I can turn that one into peaking. Or if I want false color, I could turn one into false color. Waveform monitor. We also have them here. All of them can be dedicated to appear here, or to send it out to Video Village, or not send out to Video Village. So if you want the waveform here, but you don't want it out, just put it up in here, you can bring it up. These keys are also programmable, so if you don't even want to look over here, you can just program one of the keys for this. So everything's very customizable.
And how about LUTs?
The basic LUTs that are built in are the Canon LUTs in piece, but you can also upload a single LUT as well if you want to create your own LUT. Right now, just one can be uploaded to it. And those LUTs then can be applied to the Finder if you want to see it, to the, out to the Video Village. If you want to see it, you can put the LUT on here and send it out.
Oh, you're working with ACES?
Yes, it's complete. It's already completely ACES compliant. There's already an ODT and an IDT, and we shot the demo film in ACES. So yeah, ACES, everything's for us is ACES. So we've been on board with ACES since before everybody liked it. So
now, what about all the people that went out and bought a Super 35 camera, and then you come out with a full frame? What do you tell those people?
They did fine. I mean, Canon's been through this before. The whole 5D thing that got us started was a full-frame SLR. And for years, everybody seemed to be shooting full-frame SLR movies. It became more of a, I think full-frame SLR films should have been more of a right than more of a privilege than a right, because everything was shallow depth of field, shallow depth of field. I think you want those options, but they have to be used properly, not just because it's full frame. I think there are films that call for full frame, and there are shows and shots that call for full frame, and some that don't. So the nice part about this is you just pick the crop you want up to full frame.
But you're protecting their investment. I was trying to get you to this because
for
for $2,500,
well, for now, yeah,
you can swap out the
right.
sensor.
We don't want to take the people who did buy the 700, which is still a camera that we're selling and I think has a real valid place in the marketplace. And there is a price difference. This is about $5,000 more, I believe. But if you already own a 700, we will upgrade it to a full frame version for $2,500. But there's a cutoff on that. Probably by the time you see this, you blew it. I'm not sure. And then it becomes $5,000. That becomes $5,000. Since we haven't shipped this yet, if you already own it now, you're definitely covered. But I forget what the cutoff date was for this. But then it'll be $5,000. So the sensors are interchangeable. The mounts are interchangeable. The sensor, though, is only interchangeable once because it's a destructive process. So if you want to go from Super 35 to full frame, it's a one-time, you can't go back. But the sensors can, once you got the parts, we can swap back and part mounts all the time.
Let's see it in action.
Sure, we can do
Let's
that.
shoot some.
We do. We're set out on the patio to set up and start shooting. I think.
Seeing the depth. And can we turn the area light on? So what we've got here is a C700 full frame and a Canon C700 with a Super 35 sensor. For the larger sensor, we're using a Zeiss 28 to 80. We've got it pretty near wide open, close to 2.9, and it's at 80 millimeter. The other lens is a Canon zoom 14.5 to 60. We've got that at about a 50 millimeter, and we're at 2.8. We're trying to get them in the same ballpark and trying to get the monitors to look somewhat the same, but it really doesn't matter because we're shooting raw, and none of this is baked in anyway. It's just for our viewing. So are we ready to roll?
If you like.
Okay.
Ready?
Let's go ahead and roll.
We are rolling on both.
Right. I have something to try. May I borrow one of these?
Sure. Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. Now I've given Megan something that she's going to spin in front of the camera, and I want to see. Normally on a a regular shutter, this would cause
You should see it bending.
you would see it bending. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying
jello
to see.
effect or
Jello,
whatever the term is,
jello
yep.
cam. But the camera with the global shutter should not
Its bending should
experience
be
that.
quite minimal, yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and roll again.
Rolling on
And
both.
Action, Megan.
Baton time.
Faster. Okay.
In front of your face. There we go.
Yep. In front of your face.
There you go. Perfect.
And faster.
Yeah, so you are starting to see the baton
As fast as you
bend.
can, Megs. Now what we're setting up to do is a little bit of high speed, 60
Yes.
frames a second. In order to get 60, we had to bump the ISO on the full frame camera up to 3200 ISO.
And especially on the non-global shutter piece, you will see that starting to bend.
Okay.
Definitely see the wobble.
All right, let's cut it. We don't want to have to sit through too much of this.
Okay. This is the full frame. Yep. And this will be the Super 35.
Okay, let's wrap it up out here and we'll take it into our friends at Codex.
Sounds like a plan. Okay.
Now we're going to check out the workflow. This is a Codex workflow. Brian Gaffney from Codex and Michael Booth. Michael, you're in the dark a little bit, so come on a little bit this way. Come into the light. So tell us, what are we looking at here? What's the workflow?
So with the C700 camera, we recorded onto a media card, 1 or 2 terabyte capture drive. After recording, they were popped out of the camera by the loader and would be handed off to your DIT. So in this role, Michael was actually the DIT on the Dish Full of Dollars project that we'll see screened later. And we'll show today, we just loaded up the media from set. You can see what you shot there. And Michael, why don't you take off the LUT that we're applying to this so you can see the raw file. And here he's in the color correction module. You can see this is the raw file. When you have that, if you look at the waveform over there, you see that the parade is kind of squashed and you have your red, green, and blue parade is sort of mushed down there. But when he applies the lookup table, that wide dynamic range that this camera has of all those 14 to 15 stops can be exposed and opened up. And now we see the skin cones fall into a normal place, the greens look green, and the colors look balanced. And then from there, Michael can adjust the density if he wants to sort of, increase the overall, bring down the highlights and the blacks by lowering the density and clicking that. So you see over here, you can adjust the D on the RGB values, and that reduces that. Now he's adjusting the highlights to bring those down. And then from there, he's going through basically a workflow where we had talked about ACES earlier. We could have the IDT from the camera input. We can color through that through an ODT that takes you out of ACES space. In this case, we have a lookup table applied that's taking from the color space of the camera raw native, which is what we call C-Log2 in this case, and we're mapping it to Rec 709. So the lookup table is doing that heavy lifting, and then Michael's able to shade through there, just do some coarse adjustments, adjust your black level, and you can see here if you want to crush that down, you can grab that handle and sort of put a little contrast back into the picture. So once you would set up this color preview and working with your DP, you would say, hey, do we like this? Does this look good? He says add a little density, put a little red into it. You can then go with that. And at this point, you would continue on to the next shot and the next shot. And with the software, you can QC that. We're in the review module. Michael's going to jump out of this real quick, go back to the library. So we just wanted to show you that we can see the pictures, but there's a couple of things you would do beforehand. So in this case, he's got these shots selected here. If you go over to the right-hand side, we have the ability to look at the metadata of this clip. So we can look at that, we can click on that, and you can see some information about the shot, the name, the information, the resolution. You can see the file size and get a little bit of history as far as the clips. From there, you would actually want to go ahead and clone this material and move it off. So right now in the upper right-hand corner, we have a little blue bar moving across. If Michael clicks on that, you see that it'll take you to a project, and we're copying the original raw, near 6K files off to a small USB C drive that James Broad says, I want to copy this stuff. So I'm writing the raw material to a USB C drive. Now, this material has a bandwidth capability of like 2,500 megabytes a second. We have it on the capture drive. Michael's playing off, he's color correcting, he's doing all that right from the dock hooked up to the laptop, and he's playing off that while he's cloning. Now, we have we're doing this all on the desktop with lightweight footprint, just a Mac, simple Mac desktop and the stock. But below them is this more powerful system called the Vault XL. This system can clone, copy, and playback 4K in real time. So that 27 minutes that's taking the time to go to the slower USB-C drive can actually be done faster than real time. So 23 minutes on a 1 terabyte drive copies in about 12 minutes. So if I'm in production and I have rental access to a vault, that's what I want to say. Hey, give me the vault, because now I'm going to get handed 2, 3 capture drives. I can clone them off. And you're not just cloning anymore on jobs. You know, you'll find that you're also setting up video village. You're helping solve other problems with camera. There's a lot of tasks on set that a DIT may, you know, get involved in, and you just don't want to sit and watch blue bars move all day. So having high performance, high speed, fast access, that's really what Codex is about. However, price, economics, they all come into play too. So if you don't have a vault, you can do it with a low cost dock hooked up to a Mac laptop, and that's what we wanted to show off tonight. So we're able to clone, copy, and the other thing I'd like to do is, could you render a deliverable, like generate a ProRes version of one of these shots, and we'll render that out to the drive as well. And then from there, this is the essence of the workflow. You're going to get your cards, you want to QC them, scrub through the clips, make sure that there's no black frames or anything that's, you know, falling apart, be able to report that back. Now, you've been monitoring normally live while you're recording, but you want to look at what you have recorded as well and make sure it's okay. The other thing is the camera has names like A001, C001, you know, blah-de-blah. That means nothing to an editor, right? He's going to be getting script notes that have, you know, scene and page setup. So he wants to know, what was a scene take, 102, take 2, take 3, which one is it? So in the software, you can go ahead and name those clips, keeping the metadata and all the shot name original, but adding the additional names that's for editorial. And then you can generate color decision lists with this. You can output an ALE along with this, so you'll get your original files, all your metadata, color deliverables if you'd like. So in here, Michael's got a C700 ProRes file set up. On the top, you can see the name of the file, what file type. If you click in file type, you can see that there's other options available besides making ProRes. You can make DNX for your Avid if you cut into Avid, or if you're going to be going off to visual effects, you can render out OpenEXRs from this and take those into your Nuke software. You might need to make a DCP because you want to screen some of this stuff at a theater that doesn't have a Codex vault hooked up to it. So you have all this capability to make multiple deliverables. In this case, we're just making a ProRes. Michael said, I want to make it 2K, but you can make a 4K ProRes as well. You could render with the original source frame, or you can push that. Sometimes you'll get something we shot at 2398, but you really needed to be at 24. You can render those transforms. You can burn in information about the clip that you may want to watermark it because you're handing off a copy to an editor or to a director, but it's also your original assets. You don't want to have that full frame image out there unspoiled, or you don't want to spoil it because the DP says, don't send me that, I want to see my pictures. So you have the capability to really customize your deliverable and set it up. And so he's got this configured right now, and then could launch a deliverable from the library still while we're playing back. So let's go back to the library and we'll take a clip and render it so you can get a sense of performance. So render speeds and all that is depending on your target drive. Jim brought me this drive here. It's an OWC Mercury on the Pro. Did you win this at I think you did.
I buy those.
Okay. But anyway, this is a typical drive that a producer will give you. But some of the key things to think about is when you're moving data, lots of data, and you heard Tim talk about the fact that the C700 full frame is lots of data. If you're going to go off to a third-party drive, there's Thunderbolt and there's USB-C, but you'll get a lot of times where it says Thunderbolt. The producer goes, it's the same size as Thunderbolt, this is better. But it's really still a USB-C drive like this is. I have one from G-Tech as a Thunderbolt drive, but if you take the casing off, that Thunderbolt cable is just plugged into a USB-C adapter. It's really a USB-C drive. So you really want to look at the specs deeply. The main thing to look at is bandwidth. So when you're moving this and you get these shuttle drives, you want to have something in the 350 to 500 megabytes per second range. If the producer brings you back these, 130 megabytes per second, you're going to say, for an extra $100, you're going to save a lot of OT because that's what you're going to be paying me to sit on set and watch these blue bars move. So nobody wants that to be part of their life. They want to get done, get up and wrapped and move on and do the other jobs they want to do. So Codex is about speed and transform. So up there he's rendering away. If you click back on the job queue, you can see that he's doing a clone now, and he's also got the, did you render that clip out already?
Not yet.
Okay. So he can select a clip here, tell it what do you want to render. He's got the clip that we defined already, the Canon C700 ProRes. Now he can define that path. So he's going to go to Jim's drive, go to the C700 folder, and then in here it's going to generate his deliverables there. So he'll launch that off, and that's going ahead, and you can do multiple things in the background. In fact, you can do parallel things in the background. So if you have a task that you just need to every day clone, make a deliverable, or just clone and do a report, you can set up a template in the system that's automatic, will do that for you as soon as you plug the drive in, or you can manually launch it. So the system's very easy to use. We do training every Thursdays in Los Angeles if people want to get a more hands-on, in-depth approach. Feel free to call. It's free. We feed you as well on top of that. Canon has been a great host for some of those training events, and we've been doing those frequently here as well. It's a nice facility, a good location, plus they have access to the cameras and a lot of the other equipment. But everything we're seeing here today in this Canon environment is fantastic. We're looking at a 4K Canon projector. We're monitoring, you know, on the outside on the DPV 2420, which is an HDR display. And we also have the fact that the cameras are made by Canon. So a really nice facility. We're glad to be here with Jim and the whole team from DCS. And if there's any questions, feel free to come up to us afterwards. Michael's here. He was all ready to do the demo, but I'm the guy standing in the light. So if you do have any questions, ask me or Michael, and we'd be glad to help you out.
I have a couple questions to start. So we're playing back on a 4K projector. Is this actually playing back 4K in real time, or is that a proxy?
No, we only play back. There is no proxies in Codex. We have what's called the virtual file system. So if Michael were to pop the drive out, all these pictures would go away. Don't do that now while you're rendering. But the nice thing is that you're not working from a proxy. You're not sort of making assumptions from that. It's always working from the full frame data. All the metadata that comes from that camera is captured on the system. It's passed all the way through in your deliverables. So this is the most complete way to get your data, you know, put together, packed with all that information. Lots of times people copy from our system, move the drive over 3 inches, hook it into another workstation, copy it back onto there, and then go into something like Resolve or Colorfront OSD to do the dailies. That's a lot of copying time to do the same exact thing. I mean, a ProRes file or a DNX file is the same file, and everyone's using the same SDKs. So it's kind of redundant to have to move the files to, you know, 2 inches to put them on another workstation when you could do it from here fast and furious. However, people have their methods and their workflows, and we don't want to force you into using a particular tool. We just have a nice Swiss Army knife of application here that allow you to do multiple tasks, from cloning, data management, archiving, color correction, generating some dailies, getting a report out about what you did to give it to editorial, so, you know, everyone knows that, you know, what we captured is what we have, and that we haven't lost anything in the process.
Now, is the computer and the GPU, is that part of what you provide, or it's independent?
So we have a couple of things. In this case, we're using a dock and a host computer, being the Apple Mac laptop, and it has its own GPU, and it's still giving us this performance. On the other extreme, we have the Vault XL, which has an NVIDIA Titan X card in there and the latest 1080i GPU, and it can do, you know, 100 frames per second rendering off 6K files. So it's a question of price for performance and what your show will pay for. Most cases, if you're doing television shows and raw workflows, you're going to work from your laptop and hook up your external storage and use a dock.
Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the footage that we shot. First up, we have something from the full frame. Some of the differences, you'll see this is a full frame, so we have less depth of field. You'll notice the bokeh on the lights in the background, and it's also, what kind of shutter are we looking at here, Tim?
That's not the global shutter.
This is not the global shutter, so we're going to see maybe a jello effect when we're moving.
Baton, yeah. Or in the rod, I guess.
Now that seems like it's a little bit blown out. What kind of LUT do we have on here?
So what we did is we took the raw file and we applied the out-of-box Canon supplied LUT. However, that's what we rendered to earlier, but you'll see now that Michael can go in there and he can adjust CDLs where he can actually bring down that skin tone. And it was really just the fact that you put in the LUT, it's designed, you know, for a certain exposure, and then when it comes in there, if it's clipping a little bit, it's still a raw file. You can bring back that highlight detail or eliminate it so it isn't causing the skin tones to look so blown out.
And let's play it one more time.
Yeah, play it down now.
So look at the motion, look at the bokeh in the background, and we're going to see the Super 35 version, and so remember some of these things to compare. And this is the next shot, which is slow-mo.
So this is 60 frames a second.
60 frames a second, right. And again, this is the full frame. C700 FF.
Yes, C700 FF for full frame, C700 GS for global shutter, and then C700 for Super 35.
And we're doing this just to see what happens with focus. We got a little bit more focus with the Super 35. So what kind of shutter is this that we're seeing on this camera?
We went to 60 on this as well. We did both, actually. We did 23 and we did it shutter. This is the global shutter.
But this is global, so we shouldn't see the as much of a jello effect.
Right. That rod should stay much more straight without bending.
Yeah, less motion blur for sure.
Just playing for a few minutes. We're going to start wrapping it up. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So that's it. Thanks again.